Before we begin tonight's story, if you're finding these accounts from law enforcement compelling, please take a moment to subscribe and hit that like button. It really helps us bring you more of these disturbing true stories. And I'm always curious where in the world you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. Now, let's talk about what happened in Redemption, Colorado in 1989. My name is Rita Morales, and for over 5 years before the election, I served as Sheriff of Redemption, Colorado. I need someone who knows the reasons why I'm telling this story now, who understands the choice I faced, and who might judge whether I made the right decision. I'm not sure I made the right decision, and to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what decision I made. Redemption was a small mining town tucked into the San Juan Mountains, population 156 by the 1989 census. It had been 156 for as long as anyone could remember. People were born, people died, but somehow the number always stayed the same. I never thought much about it. Small towns are like that, stable, unchanging. The kind of place where your great-grandfather's name is still on the welcome sign. I'd moved to Redemption 5 years earlier with my husband Dave and our daughter Sophie, who was 4 at the time. Dave had grown up there, inherited his family's hardware store, and wanted to raise Sophie the way he'd been raised. Small town, clean air, everybody knowing everybody. I'd been a deputy in Denver, working gang crimes and drug busts, and the idea of being sheriff in a place where the biggest crime was kids spray painting the water tower sounded like paradise. It was paradise. For 5 years. Then came October 23rd, 1989. I was at the station doing paperwork when my deputy, Carl Henderson, knocked on my door. Carl was 62, had been deputy for 30 years, and had the kind of calm demeanor that made you think nothing could rattle him. But that afternoon, he looked rattled. Rita, the mayor's called an emergency town meeting. Tonight, 7 p.m. at the hall. Everyone has to attend. What's it about? He didn't say. Just said it was urgent. Mandatory attendance. He paused. He also said you should bring Dave and Sophie. Bring my family to a town meeting? What the hell is this about? Carl shook his head. I don't know. But Harold's never called an emergency meeting in the 30 years I've been here. Not once. Mayor Harold Grimshaw was a fixture in Redemption, just like the mountains and the old mine shafts. He'd been mayor for 25 years, and before that his father had been mayor, and before that his grandfather. The Grimshaw family had founded Redemption in 1889. If Harold said it was urgent, it was urgent. That evening, Dave, Sophie, and I walked to the town hall. The whole town was there. All 156 of us packed into the meeting hall that usually held maybe 50 for council sessions. I saw familiar faces everywhere. Mr. Patterson, who ran the general store. Annie Chen from the diner. The Martinez family who lived 2 houses down from us. Everyone looked calm, almost serene, which struck me as odd for an emergency meeting. Harold stood at the podium, waiting for everyone to settle. When the room finally went quiet, he cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. I know this is unusual, calling you here like this, but we're approaching a significant date in Redemption's history, and we need to make a decision as a community. I glanced at Dave. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw set in a way I recognized. He knew something. He'd known before we came here. As most of you know, Harold continued, Redemption was founded in 1889 by my great-grandfather, Theodore Grimshaw, and 15 other families. What you may not know, what only certain families have traditionally known, is the circumstances of that founding. The room was absolutely silent. Sophie was sitting between Dave and me, swinging her legs, oblivious. In 1889, this region was in the grip of a severe mining depression. Towns were dying. People were starving. The 16 founding families came here desperate, with nothing but hope and a willingness to do whatever it took to survive. Harold pulled out an old leather-bound book. They made a deal, a contract. 100 years of prosperity, of stability, of survival. In exchange, he let the words hang there. In exchange for what? I called out. Harold looked at me. In exchange for the town's ending. 100 years to the day from the contract's signing, October 30th, 1889, the deal comes due. That's 7 days from now. I felt cold despite the warmth of the crowded room. What do you mean, the town's ending? I mean exactly that, Sheriff. The contract states that on October 30th, 1989, at midnight, every resident of Redemption must die. That was the agreement. 100 years of life in exchange for a guaranteed end. The room erupted. Well, half the room erupted. I was on my feet shouting questions. So were a few others. Newcomers like me, people who'd moved to Redemption in the last decade or so. But the old families, the ones who'd been here for generations, sat quietly, their faces calm. "This is insane," I shouted. "You're talking about mass suicide." "I'm talking about honoring a contract," Harold said calmly. "The deal was made by our ancestors. It's kept this town alive for a century. Every person in this room has benefited from that deal. We've had prosperity when other mining towns died. We've had health when other communities suffered. We've had peace. That wasn't luck, Sheriff. That was the deal. I don't care what kind of deal was made 100 years ago. You can't ask people to die for it." "I'm not asking. The contract is binding. But we do have a choice in how we fulfill it." Harold opened the old book. The contract allows for a vote. If the town votes to honor the deal, we do so peacefully, together, at the appointed time. If we vote against it, the contract is broken, and the consequences are immediate and severe. What consequences? The prosperity ends. The protection ends. The century of borrowed time ends. Everyone who's lived because of the deal dies immediately, along with anyone who's gained from it. That means everyone in this room, Sheriff. Whether you knew about the deal or not, you've benefited from it. You've lived in safety here. Your daughter has grown up healthy and protected. That was the deal's doing. I looked at Dave. His face was pale, but calm. "You knew," I said. "You knew about this." "My father told me when I turned 18. It's tradition. The old families tell their children when they come of age, so they can make an informed choice about whether to stay or leave Redemption." "And you chose to stay? You chose to bring our daughter here knowing this?" "I chose to give her 9 years of peace and safety. 9 years she might not have had in Denver, with your job, with the gangs and the drugs and the violence. I chose to give her a good childhood before," he stopped. "Before what? Before she dies at age 9 because of some insane contract?" Harold cleared his throat. "Sheriff, please. We need to vote. Everyone age 13 and above is eligible. We need to know how we proceed." "There's nothing to vote on. We're not doing this." "Then vote no. That's your right. But understand the consequences." They passed out ballots. Actual ballots, as if this were a normal town council vote on property taxes or school funding. The question was simple. Do you vote to honor the contract of 1889 and peacefully fulfill its terms on October 30th, 1989, at midnight? Yes or no? I marked no. So hard the pen tore through the paper. I watched as everyone else calmly marked their ballots and placed them in the box that Carl was holding. When the count was done, Harold read the results. 155 yes, 1 no. The room was quiet. Everyone was looking at me. That's impossible, I said. You're telling me everyone, Dave, you voted yes? For our daughter to die? Dave's eyes were filled with tears, but he nodded. I voted for her to die peacefully, surrounded by community and love, rather than screaming in terror when the contract breaks and takes everything back all at once. You don't know that would happen. Yes, I do. It's happened before. In 1956, there was another mining town called Salvation, about 60 miles from here. They had a similar contract, 50 years instead of 100. When the time came, they voted no. 23 people voted to break the contract. Dave's voice was shaking. They all died within an hour. Massive system failures, simultaneous heart attacks, sudden cancers. The ones who survived long enough to understand what was happening said it felt like being unmade, like the universe was taking back every moment they'd borrowed. I felt like I was going to be sick. This is insane. This is a cult. This is democracy, Harold said quietly. We took a vote. The majority has decided. In 7 days, at midnight on October 30th, we will gather in the town square. Those who wish to honor the contract will do so peacefully. Those who don't, he looked at me, those who don't are free to leave redemption. You have 7 days to go. Leave. Leave my town, my home, or stay and join us. The choice is yours, Sheriff, but the vote has been taken, and the will of the community is clear. The meeting adjourned. People filed out quietly, calmly, like they'd just voted on a new stop sign. Dave took Sophie's hand and started walking toward the door. Dave, we need to talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, Rita. The vote is done. The hell it is. I'm the sheriff. I'm responsible for the safety of this town. I'm not going to let 155 people commit suicide. He turned to face me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Peace. Absolute, terrifying peace. You can't stop us, Rita. You can arrest us, but there are 155 of us and one of you. You can try to force us to leave, but this is our home, and we have the legal right to be here. You can call for outside help, but what are you going to tell them? That the town voted to die and you want the state police to force us to live? He shook his head. There's no law against this. We're adults, we're sound of mind, and we've made our choice democratically. What about Sophie? She's 9 years old. She doesn't get to vote. Sophie is our daughter. We make decisions for her until she's old enough to decide for herself. His voice softened. Rita, please, use these 7 days to understand. Talk to people. Read the histories. See what the contract has given us, and what breaking it would take away. And then, if you still want to say no, you can leave. Take Sophie if you want. We won't stop you. But don't try to stop us. He walked out, Sophie's hand in his, leaving me standing alone in the town hall. I didn't go home that night. I went back to the station and sat at my desk, trying to process what had just happened. The town had voted to die. My husband had voted for our daughter to die. And apparently this was legal, voluntary, democratic. I called the county sheriff's office in Durango, explained the situation to Sheriff Carver, who I'd worked with a few times on jurisdiction issues. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Rita, are you feeling okay? Do you need me to send someone down there? I'm fine. I need to know what my options are here. Your options? Rita, if what you're describing is real, if this isn't some kind of breakdown you're having, then your options are limited. You can't force people to not kill themselves. You can try to commit them for psychiatric evaluation, but you'd need to demonstrate they're a danger to themselves or others, and if they're all calm and rational about it... He trailed off. Is this really happening? Yes. Jesus Christ. Okay, I'll make some calls, see if there's any legal precedent. But Rita, if 155 people have decided to do this, and they're all adults of sound mind, I don't know that there's anything anyone can do to stop them. This isn't a crime. It's insane, but it's not illegal. I hung up and sat there in the dark station watching the clock tick toward midnight. 7 days. I had 7 days to figure this out. The next morning, I went to the library. Redemption's library was small, mostly used by school kids, but it had an archive section with old town records. If there was documentation of this contract, it would be there. The librarian, Mrs. Thornton, looked up when I walked in. She was 78, had been librarian for 40 years, and had voted yes. "Good morning, Sheriff. I thought you might come by. I need to see the town records from 1889. "Of course." She led me to a locked room in the back. "The founding documents are in here. The contract is in the third box, if you're wondering." She left me alone. I opened the third box and found it immediately. The Contract of Redemption, dated October 30th, 1889. It was handwritten on parchment, signed by 16 people. The language was formal, almost biblical, but the terms were clear. 100 years of prosperity for the town and its inhabitants. Protection from disease, violence, economic ruin. Growth without change. The population would stabilize at a sustainable number. Peace and plenty for a century. In exchange, at midnight on October 30th, 1989, every soul residing in Redemption would return to the entity that had granted the deal. The contract specified peaceful cessation of life if the town voted to honor it, or immediate reclamation of all borrowed time if they voted to break it. At the bottom of the contract was a symbol I didn't recognize. Not a signature, but a mark. Something that looked like a combination of geometric shapes and organic curves, like it existed in more dimensions than the paper could properly show. I took the contract to Harold's house. He was in his study, reading, as calm as ever. "Sheriff, would you like some tea?" "I want to know what you sold the town to." He set down his book. "We don't know its name. The founders called it the Keeper of Years. It appeared to them when they were at their most desperate, offered them the deal, and has held up its end ever since." "And you believe this? You really believe some entity is going to come collect souls?" "I've seen its work. We all have. Redemption has never had a murder, never had a suicide outside of the natural aging process, never had a major illness outbreak, never had an economic collapse even during the Depression. That's not luck, Sheriff. That's the contract. Or it's just a small town that's been fortunate. Then test it. Vote no. Let's all vote no and see what happens." He leaned forward. "But I've lived here 67 years. I've seen what the contract does. And I've read the accounts from Salvation in 1956. I know what happens when you break it. So yes, I voted yes. I'll die peacefully in 7 days, surrounded by my family and friends, having lived a good life. That's better than most people get." I spent the next 3 days talking to people. The old families explained their family histories, how their great-great-grandparents had come here desperate and broken and found peace. The newer families, the ones who'd moved here in the last few decades, were angry at first but gradually understood the logic. If the contract was real, breaking it meant everyone died anyway, immediately and horribly. If the contract wasn't real, then voting yes meant nothing would happen at midnight on the 30th and they'd all wake up on the 31st embarrassed but alive. Either way, voting yes was the rational choice. I was losing my mind. On day 4, I found Dave in our backyard with Sophie. They were planting tulip bulbs. "For spring," Sophie explained. "Daddy says it's important to plant hope even when you're not sure you'll see it bloom." I pulled Dave aside. "You're teaching our 9-year-old to accept death?" I'm teaching her that there are things bigger than us, that sometimes the right thing is hard, and that being part of a community means sharing in both its joys and its responsibilities. She's 9 years old, and she's a part of this town. She's benefited from the contract just like we all have. He touched my face. Rita, I know this is hard for you. You didn't grow up here. You don't have the history, but please, trust me. I'm not crazy. I'm not in a cult. I've thought about this every day since I turned 18 and learned the truth. I chose to stay. I chose to have a family here, and yes, I chose to accept the terms. What if I take her and leave? What if we're gone before midnight on the 30th? His face fell. If you leave, the contract's protection doesn't follow you. You'll have taken 7 years of borrowed safety. That debt comes due wherever you are. You don't know that. Yes, I do. There was a family in Salvation who left before the deadline. They made it 50 miles away. They died in a car crash at the exact moment the contract broke. The entity doesn't care where you are, Rita. It cares about the debt. I felt trapped. Every direction I turned, every option I considered, led to the same conclusion. There was no way out. The town had made its choice, and I could either accept it or leave and hope that somehow Dave was wrong, that the contract was just a story, that nothing would happen at midnight. But I'd seen too much. The way the town never changed, the way people seemed just a little too healthy, a little too content, the way problems solved themselves just before they became serious. The contract was real. On day 5, I stopped fighting. I walked through town, and everyone was calm, preparing, making peace. I saw neighbors helping each other, families spending time together. There was no panic, no fear, just acceptance. And I started to understand why they'd voted yes. Because if you knew you were going to die, if you knew the exact date and time, wouldn't you want to go surrounded by community, with dignity, at peace? Wouldn't that be better than violence or accident or slow decay? That night, Dave held me while I cried. I don't want to lose you, I said. I don't want to lose Sophie. I know, but Rita, we were always going to lose each other eventually. This way, we just know when, and we get to say goodbye properly. I don't know if I can do this. You don't have to. You can leave. No one will judge you. But I would judge myself. I'd spend the rest of my life wondering if I'd abandoned my family in their final days because I was too afraid to face the truth. On day 6, I sat down with Sophie and tried to explain. Sweetheart, you know how sometimes things end, like when summer ends and school starts? She nodded. Well, our time in redemption is ending, but it's okay. Everyone in town is going to be together when it ends. Like a big sleepover? Something like that. Will it hurt? No, baby, it won't hurt. She thought about this. Okay, can I bring Mr. Bear? You can bring whatever you want. On the morning of day 7, October 30th, 1989, I put on my uniform and went to the station. I had a choice to make, and I had 14 hours left to make it. At noon, Carl came by. Rita, I want you to know, whatever you decide, I don't blame you. You're not from here. This isn't your burden to carry. It is now. I'm the sheriff. I'm responsible for everyone. You can't save us from ourselves. We've made our choice. At 6 p.m., Dave came to the station with Sophie. It's time to head to the square. Everyone's gathering. I haven't decided. I know. He kissed me. Whatever you choose, I love you. We both do. They left. I sat at my desk with my service weapon in front of me. I could arrest them all, try to force them to scatter. But I'd need an army to do it, and I didn't have one. I could barricade the square, but they'd just moved to another location. I could call in every law enforcement agency in Colorado, but what would I tell them? That I wanted to stop a Democratic suicide? There was nothing I could do to stop this. The only choice I had was whether to join them. At 11:30 p.m., I walked to the town square. All 155 of them were there, sitting in circles on the grass, holding hands, talking quietly. Dave and Sophie were near the center. Sophie waved when she saw me. I walked over and sat down next to them. "You're staying?" Dave asked. "I'm staying." He held my hand. Sophie held my other hand. At 11:59, the mayor stood. "It's time. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for honoring the contract. Thank you for 100 years of peace." The clock struck midnight, and I closed my eyes, waiting to see if the contract was real. I opened my eyes. I was still in the town square. Dave was still holding my hand. Sophie was still beside me. Everyone was still there. It was 12:01 a.m., October 31st, 1989. We were alive. For a moment, nobody moved. We just sat there in the darkness, holding hands, waiting. Then someone laughed, a nervous, disbelieving sound that broke the tension. "It didn't work," someone said. "The contract wasn't real. We're still here." People started standing, looking around, touching themselves and each other to confirm they were solid, breathing, alive. The relief was palpable. Some people were crying, others were laughing. The contract had been a story after all, a 100-year-old delusion, and we'd all fallen for it. Except Harold was still sitting, perfectly calm, checking his watch. "It's 12:02, he said loudly, and the celebration died down. The contract specified midnight. We have 1 minute's grace, perhaps, but I suggest we don't celebrate too quickly. "Harold, it's over," someone called out. "Nothing happened." "Nothing happened yet," he corrected. "The contract's terms—" He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes went wide, and he clutched his chest. Then he collapsed. I ran to him, my training kicking in automatically. CPR, check for breathing, check for pulse. Nothing. Harold Grimshaw was dead, and he'd died with a look of almost peaceful acceptance on his face. Before I could process this, I heard another cry. Mrs. Thornton, the librarian, had fallen. Then Mr. Patterson from the general store. Then 3 more people. Then 5. Then 10. They were dropping like dominoes, all the oldest residents first. The ones whose families had founded redemption in 1889. "Everyone stay calm," I shouted. But panic was already spreading. People were running, screaming, checking on loved ones. Dave was holding Sophie close, his face pale. Within 5 minutes, 23 people were dead. All of them over 60. All of them from founding families. And then it stopped. The rest of us stood there shaking, terrified, surrounded by corpses, waiting to see who would be next. But nobody else fell. At 12:15 a.m., I called the county sheriff. At 12:30, I called the state police. By 1 a.m., we had ambulances, investigators, and emergency services flooding into Redemption, trying to make sense of a mass casualty event that defied explanation. The medical examiner would later determine that all 23 had died of sudden cardiac arrest, occurring simultaneously at 12:02 a.m. No underlying conditions, no toxins, no explicable cause, just 23 healthy people whose hearts all stopped at once. But I knew the truth. So did everyone else in Redemption. The contract was real, and we'd broken it. The question was, why had it only taken 23 lives? Why not all 156? Over the next 2 days, As the town dealt with funerals and investigations and the media circus that descended on us, I tried to find answers. I went back to the library, back to the founding documents, looking for anything I'd missed. That's when I found the second book. It was hidden behind the contract, in the same box. A ledger. The ledger of prosperity, written in the same formal hand as the contract. It listed every benefit the town had received over the past 100 years, every prevented disaster, every averted illness, every stroke of good fortune. Each entry was dated and described in meticulous detail. 1890, winter storm diverted, no livestock lost. 1892, scarlet fever outbreak contained to single family. 1907. Mine collapse. All workers extracted safely. 1918. Spanish flu, 0 casualties. 1929. Economic depression. No businesses failed. 1956. Knowledge of salvation's failure delivered as warning. On and on, page after page, a century of borrowed luck. At the end of the ledger was a final entry, dated October 30th, 1989. Contract fulfilled in part. 23 souls from founding lines taken as immediate payment. Remainder of debt deferred. New terms to be negotiated. The town of redemption remains under observation. Prosperity continues conditionally. I stared at those words. New terms to be negotiated. The contract wasn't over. It had just changed. I took the ledger to Dave. "Did you know about this?" He shook his head. "My father only told me about the contract, not about any ledger. He said if the vote was yes, we'd die peacefully. If it was no, we'd all die horribly. There was no third option." Well, apparently there is. The contract took its payment. 23 people, all from founding families, and now it wants to negotiate new terms. Terms for what? I don't know, but I'm the only person who voted no, and I'm still alive. I'm the sheriff. Maybe I'm supposed to be the negotiator. That night, I went back to the town square. Alone. Midnight again. "I'm here," I said to the empty air. "You want to negotiate? Let's negotiate." Nothing happened. I stood there feeling ridiculous, talking to nobody, until I heard it. A voice. Not spoken aloud, but somehow present in the air, in the space between heartbeats. Sheriff Rita Morales, the dissenter, the one who voted no. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Just darkness and the faint glow of streetlights. "You're the keeper of years," I said, "the entity from the contract. I am the holder of bargains, the weigher of time, the guardian of deals made in desperation. Your town's founders came to me, broken and begging. I gave them a century. They promised me payment. We agreed on terms. You agreed that 156 people would die. I agreed that a debt would be paid. Your town grew to 156 souls. All would have been taken at midnight had the vote been unanimous, but it was not. One voice dissented. Yours. So you killed 23 people instead. I took what was immediately owed. The founding families, the direct descendants, their debt was absolute. The others, there was something like a pause. The others benefited from the contract but did not make it. Their debt is negotiable. What do you want? What I have always wanted. Balance. The founding families received 100 years. They paid with their lives, as agreed. The others received lesser benefits. They will pay lesser prices. Like what? That is what we must negotiate, Sheriff. You are the voice of those who remain. You will speak for them, and I will listen. Then we will agree on new terms. I felt cold. And if I refuse, then the original contract stands. All remaining debts are called in immediately. 133 people die within the hour. That's not a negotiation. That's extortion. It is the nature of all bargains. One party has something the other wants. I have given your town a century of prosperity. You have given me incomplete payment. We must settle the difference. I thought about the ledger, about all the benefits listed there. The avoided disasters, the prevented deaths, the sustained peace. Had we really benefited, or had we just been living normally while thinking we were special? How do I know any of this is real? How do I know you didn't just cause those 23 heart attacks to make us think the contract had power? You don't, but you will, because I will show you what the contract has protected you from, what happens when I withdraw my hand. The next morning, October 31st, a truck driver fell asleep on Highway 550 and crashed into the gas station on the edge of town. The explosion killed 4 people and destroyed half a block. That afternoon, 3 children playing near the old mine shafts fell through rotted boards. 2 died instantly. The third was trapped for 6 hours before rescue crews could reach her. That night, a fire started in the Martinez family's home. Electrical failure, the fire marshal would later say. Just bad luck. The whole family died in their sleep. By November 1st, 13 more people were dead. The entity's voice came to me in my dreams. This is what redemption looks like without my protection. This is the normal rate of disaster for a town of this size, in this location, with these industries. You have lived your whole lives thinking you were safe. You were only safe because I made you so. Stop it, I begged. Stop killing people. I am not killing them. I am simply no longer preventing their deaths. This is the price of refusing the contract. This is what you chose when you voted no. When I woke up, I found Carl in my office. He looked 10 years older than he had a week ago. Rita, you have to fix this. I don't know how, but you have to stop what's happening. I'm trying, but the entity wants a new contract, new terms. Then negotiate, give it what it wants. And what does it want, Carl? More lives, more time? I'm the sheriff. My job is to protect this town, not sell it. Your job is to keep us alive. The old contract was supposed to kill us all. At least it gave us 100 years first. If you can negotiate something better, anything better, you have to try. He was right. I knew he was right. That night, I went back to the square. I'm ready to negotiate, I told the darkness. Tell me what you want. What I have always wanted. Time, lives, the essence of mortal existence freely given, but perhaps not all at once, perhaps in smaller installments. What does that mean? A new contract. 50 years instead of 100. Smaller protections instead of absolute safety, and at the end, fewer deaths. How many? 13. 1 for every decade. Those 13 will be chosen by lottery. The rest will live, will leave, will continue their lives beyond redemption's boundaries. I felt sick. You want me to agree that 13 people will die in 50 years? I want you to agree that 133 people will live who would otherwise die this month. That is the bargain, Sheriff. 13 in 50 years, or 133 in 30 days. How do I know you'll keep your word? How do I know you won't just keep taking and taking? Because I have kept my word for 100 years. The original contract was honored to the letter. Only when your town broke faith did I take what was owed. The voice seemed to solidify somehow, becoming more present. I do not lie, Sheriff. I do not cheat. I offer fair bargains to desperate people. If you accept, the contract will be binding. If you refuse, The natural order will take its course, and redemption will die like every other mining town that couldn't sustain itself. I thought about Sophie, about Dave, about all the people who'd voted yes, thinking they were protecting their families and were now dying anyway because of accidents and disasters that shouldn't be happening. I need to put it to a vote. Like before, let the town decide. No, the town already voted. They chose death. You chose life. Now you must choose for them. I'm not a dictator. I'm an elected official. I can't make this decision alone. You already did. You voted no. You rejected their choice. Now you must live with the consequences of your conviction. There was something almost like respect in the voice. They were willing to die together. Are you willing to let some die so others can live? I called an emergency meeting the next morning, laid out the situation, explained the new terms. The reaction was mixed. Some people were grateful. 13 deaths over 50 years was better than 133 deaths in the next month. Others were horrified that we'd agreed to any deaths at all. A few demanded we break the contract again, refuse to negotiate, let nature take its course. And how many of you are willing to risk being one of the ones who die this month? I asked. How many of you are ready to watch your children get hit by cars, your houses burn down, your loved ones fall through rotted floors? Because that's what's happening. That's what will keep happening until we're all dead. Dave stood up. I vote yes to the new contract. 13 deaths over 50 years. I'll volunteer to be one of them if we draw lots today. So will I, Carl said. One by one, people stood, volunteering, accepting the terms. Within an hour, we had 30 people willing to be in the lottery pool for the 13 deaths. I took their names to the town square that night. We accept, I told the darkness. The new terms. 13 deaths over 50 years. But I want it in writing, a real contract, with real terms that we can all see and understand. Agreed. The next morning, I found a new document in my office, written on the same parchment as the original, in the same formal hand. The Contract of Redemption, second term. 50 years from November 1st, 1989. 13 lives to be taken at intervals of the entity's choosing, selected from those who had volunteered. In exchange, the town would receive moderate protection from disaster, disease, and economic ruin. Not absolute safety, but better odds than chance alone would provide. At the bottom was space for signatures, mine as the negotiator, and 13 spaces for the volunteers. We held the lottery that afternoon. 30 names in a hat. I drew 13. Dave's was one of them. He smiled when I read his name. I told you I'd volunteer. I meant it. You can back out. We can draw again. No, I signed up knowing what it meant. I'm ready. All 13 signed the contract. I signed last, my hand shaking. Then I took it back to the square and left it there, burning it in a ceremonial fire the way the entity had requested. When the flames died down, I heard the voice one last time. The contract is sealed. Redemption has 50 years. Use them well, Sheriff. The disasters stopped. The next day, no accidents. No fires, no deaths. The town slowly started to breathe again. But we all knew we were living on borrowed time. 50 years. 13 lives. It was a better deal than the original contract, but it was still a deal with something that treated human lives as currency. I've been Sheriff of Redemption for 5 years now since the vote. 5 years of watching my husband live knowing that someday, at a time not of his choosing, the contract will come for him. 5 years of seeing Sophie grow up in a town that's both safe and cursed. 5 years of wondering if I made the right choice. Did I save 133 people? Or did I just doom 13 souls to carry the burden of keeping the rest alive? I don't know. Maybe I'll never know. But I do know this. I'm the sheriff. It's my job to protect this town, and I'll keep doing it for as long as the contract lasts, even if it costs me everything. Even if it costs me the people I love most, because that's what you do when you're responsible for a town. You make the hard choices. You live with the consequences, and you hope, desperately, futilely, that you chose correctly. The first 5 years were quiet, almost normal. People started to believe maybe the entity would wait the full 50 years before collecting. Maybe we'd have decades of peace before the bill came due. I knew better. I'd read the fine print of the new contract. At intervals of the entity's choosing. That could mean tomorrow, or 10 years from now, or any time in between. I was right to worry. It happened on November 1st, 1994. Exactly 5 years after the new contract was signed. I was at the station when I felt it. A cold pressure in the air, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. The lights flickered. My radio hissed with static. Then the phone rang. "Sheriff Morales? This is Annie Chen. You need to come to the diner. You just need to come." I found her standing outside, pale and shaking, staring through the window at something inside. Through the glass, I could see someone sitting at the counter, back to us, perfectly still. "Who is it?" I asked. "Tom Patterson. He came in for breakfast an hour ago. Ordered the usual, coffee, eggs, toast, then he just stopped, mid-bite. He's been like that for 40 minutes. Tom Patterson, age 61, hardware store owner. One of the 13 who'd signed the contract. I went inside. Tom was frozen, fork halfway to his mouth, eyes open but unseeing. When I touched his shoulder, his skin was ice cold. "Tom? Can you hear me?" His lips moved, barely, just enough to whisper 2 words. "It's time." Then he crumpled forward onto the counter, fork clattering to the floor. Dead. Heart attack, the coroner would say later. But I knew the truth. The entity had come for its first payment. The funeral was 3 days later. The whole town attended. We all knew what Tom's death meant. The contract was active. The entity was keeping its word, but it would collect on its own schedule. Dave held my hand through the service. Sophie, now 14, sat on my other side, quiet and thoughtful. She'd grown up knowing about the contract, about her father's signature on it, about the debt hanging over all our heads. After the funeral, Carl pulled me aside. "We need to prepare," he said. "If it took Tom after 5 years, it might take another in 5 more. Or it might take 3 next week. We don't know the pattern. There's no pattern to prepare for. That's the point. The entity chooses when. All we can do is live knowing any of the 13 could be next. That's not living, Rita. That's waiting to die." He was right. But what choice did we have? The second death came sooner than I expected, just 6 months later, in April 1995. Margaret Reeves, age 56, schoolteacher. She was walking to church on Sunday morning when she just stopped, stood there in the middle of the street, perfectly still, while traffic backed up around her. By the time I got there, a crowd had gathered. Nobody touched her, everyone knew. "Maggie," I said softly. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes tracked to mine. There was no fear in them. Just acceptance. "I'm glad it's me and not my daughter," she whispered. "Tell her I love her. Tell her it didn't hurt." Then she collapsed, gone. 2 down. 11 to go. The town started to change after that. People became hyper-aware of the 13. Where they were, what they were doing, whether they seemed okay. It was like watching someone with a terminal diagnosis. You knew they were dying, but not when. and every good day felt like both a gift and a lie. Dave threw himself into the hardware store, working long hours, taking on projects, staying busy. I knew why. As long as he was moving, active, engaged with life, he could pretend the contract wasn't waiting for him. Sophie started keeping a journal. I found it once when I was cleaning her room, though I didn't read it. The title on the cover was enough: Life in the Shadow. That's what we were all doing, living in the shadow of the contract, trying to make the most of borrowed time. The third death was different. July 1996. Martin Hayes, age 43. Youngest of the 13. He'd been one of the first to volunteer, had practically insisted his name go in the hat. He died in his sleep, peacefully, from all appearances. But when we found him, there was something clutched in his hand. A note, written in his own handwriting, but the words, "The debt is lighter when carried willingly. Thank you for letting me bear this weight. May the others live long. May redemption prosper. The contract is just." It was signed with that same symbol from the original contract, the entity's mark. I showed it to Dave that night. Did Martin write this, or did something else use his hand? "Does it matter?" Dave asked. He volunteered. He knew what he was signing up for. But did he? Did any of you really understand what this would be like? Living under this sword? Dave was quiet for a long moment. We understood enough. We understood that without the contract we'd all be dead, that redemption would be a ghost town. We chose to keep it alive. At what cost? At whatever cost necessary. He looked at me with those tired eyes. "Rita, you saved us. When you negotiated that new contract, you gave 133 people another chance at life. Don't dishonor that by second-guessing it now." But I couldn't help second-guessing. Every time I saw one of the 13, I wondered, "Are you next?" And every time I saw everyone else, I wondered, "Do you appreciate what these 13 did for you?" Most people did, I think. The town held memorials for each of the fallen, named scholarships after them, made sure their families were taken care of. But there was also an undercurrent of relief. Every death was one fewer debt to pay, one step closer to the end of the contract. It made me sick. The fourth and fifth deaths came together. October 1997. Alice Brennan and Robert Cho. They'd been dating, I later learned, keeping it quiet because Alice was 62 and Robert was 48, and they thought people would talk. They were found in the town square, sitting on a bench, holding hands, both dead, both peaceful, both with that same serene acceptance the others had shown. The note this time was written in both their hands, alternating words. "We chose to go together rather than leave one behind to grieve alone. May our sacrifice sustain the others. The contract is just. 11 down, 8 to go." And we were only 8 years into the 50-year contract. The pattern was becoming clear. The entity wasn't spacing the deaths evenly. It was accelerating, taking them faster, maybe because it was pleased with how willingly they were going, or maybe just because it could. That's when the resistance started. A group called themselves the Freedom 13. They weren't violent, just vocal. They held protests in the town square, demanding the remaining 8 be released from their contract. They argued that we'd paid enough, that 5 deaths in 8 years was too high a price. Their leader was Daniel Ortiz, whose mother had been Margaret Reeves. He'd watched her die in the street, and he wasn't going to accept it quietly. "My mother didn't have to die," he shouted at a council meeting. "None of them had to die. This contract is murder. It's human sacrifice disguised as civic duty." "Your mother volunteered," Harold's daughter Helen reminded him. She'd taken over as mayor after her father's death. She signed the contract knowing the terms. She was coerced. The entity manipulated us into thinking we had no choice. We didn't have a choice, Dave said, standing up. It was 13 over 50 years, or 133 within a month. Your mother chose to be one of the 13 so you could live. Honor that choice, Daniel. Don't spit on her sacrifice. The room erupted. Half the town supported the Freedom 13. The other half defended the contract. I stood at the back, watching my town tear itself apart over something I had negotiated. That night I went to the square alone, called out to the darkness. We had a deal. 13 deaths over 50 years. You're taking them too fast. People are losing faith. The voice came, cold and impassive. I am taking them exactly as agreed, at intervals of my choosing. The contract does not specify equal spacing or gradual collection. It specifies 13 lives over 50 years. If I choose to take all 13 in the first decade, that is my right. That's not fair. Fair? You want to discuss fairness? Your town received 100 years of prosperity it did not earn. Your founders promised payment and then voted to die rather than let their descendants fulfill the debt. I could have taken all 156 of you that night and been within my rights. Instead, I negotiated. I offered mercy. And you dare speak to me of fairness? I felt small, helpless. What do you want me to say? That we're grateful? That we appreciate your mercy? Fine, we're grateful. We appreciate it. Now please, slow down. Give the remaining 8 more time. Why should I? Because we're suffering. Because every death tears this town apart a little more. Because if you keep going like this, there won't be a redemption left to protect. That is not my concern. My concern is the debt. 13 lives. If redemption destroys itself in the meantime, that is your choice. Not mine. I went home and found Dave waiting up for me. I heard you at the square, he said. Talking to it. It won't slow down. It says it's within its rights. It is. We agreed to its terms. He pulled me close. Rita, I need to tell you something. I've been feeling it, the pull. Like something's calling to me. I think I'm next. My blood went cold. No, you don't know that. I do. The others felt it too, before they died. A kind of peace. Like letting go of a weight you've been carrying. I've been feeling it for weeks now. Then fight it, resist, stay here with me and Sophie. I can't fight the contract, Rita. None of us can. And I don't want to. I volunteered for this. I'm ready. I'm not ready. Sophie's not ready. Sophie's 16 now. She's strong. And you're the strongest person I've ever met. You'll both be fine. Don't say that. Don't talk like you're already gone. He kissed me. I love you. I've loved you since the moment I met you, and I'm grateful for every year we've had together. But Rita, if the entity comes for me tomorrow, don't hate it. Don't hate yourself. We made a deal, and it's keeping its word. I held him that night, trying to memorize the feel of him, the sound of his breathing, the warmth of his skin, trying to prepare for something you can never prepare for. The call came 3 days later. Dave had gone to open the store like always. When he didn't come home for lunch, I knew. I found him in the back room, sitting in his father's old chair, hands folded in his lap. Eyes open but unseeing. Gone. On the desk was a note. Rita and Sophie, I love you both more than words can say. I'm sorry I had to leave you like this, but know that I go willingly and at peace. The contract has given you both more years of life than we would have had without it. Live those years fully. Love each other fiercely. And don't mourn me too long. I'll be waiting for you whenever your time comes. The contract is just. I read those words and wanted to scream. The contract is just. Everyone kept saying that like it made their deaths acceptable, like it excused the entity for taking them. But what choice did I have except to accept it? I'd negotiated the terms myself. That night, at Dave's funeral, I stood in front of the whole town and made a promise. No more. 6 have died in 8 years. That's too many, too fast. I'm going back to the entity. I'm renegotiating. I'm getting us better terms, or I'm breaking the contract entirely. Helen, the mayor, stood up. Rita, you can't. We agreed. I agreed to terms that would give people time. This isn't time. This is execution, and I won't stand for it anymore. The freedom. 13 cheered. The contract supporters looked worried, and I walked out of that funeral and straight to the town square. I want to renegotiate, I shouted at the darkness. The terms aren't fair. You're taking them too fast. Silence. I know you can hear me. Come out and talk to me. More silence. I stood there for an hour. 2 hours. Until my voice was hoarse and my legs were shaking and I knew it wasn't going to answer. The entity didn't need to negotiate. It had the power, and I didn't. All I had was the remaining 7 people who'd signed that contract, including Carl, my deputy and friend. All I had was a town divided over whether to honor or break our word. All I had was a daughter who just lost her father and a job that required me to protect people I couldn't protect. I went home and found Sophie in Dave's study, reading his journals. He wrote about you all the time, she said, about how proud he was of you, about how you saved the town. I didn't save it, I just delayed the death. No, Mom. You gave people a choice. Before the new contract, everyone was going to die. After it, most people got to live. Dad understood that. That's why he volunteered. I can't accept that. I can't accept that your father had to die to save a town. Then you're missing the point. Sophie looked up at me with Dave's eyes. Dad didn't die to save a town. He died to save people. Specific people, neighbors, friends, me, you. That's what the contract is. It's not about redemption, the place. It's about the people who live here. She was right. I knew she was right. But it didn't make it hurt less. Over the next few months, I tried everything. I pleaded with the entity every night. I consulted lawyers about breaking contracts with supernatural forces. I even tried to convince the remaining 7 to leave town, hoping distance would protect them. But they wouldn't leave. Every one of them said the same thing. We signed the contract. We gave our word. We'll honor it. And one by one, the entity came for them. Carl in 1999, Jennifer Martinez in 2001, Thomas Wright in 2003. By 2005, only 4 remained, and I was waiting to see if the entity would take them all before the 16-year mark, or if it would finally slow down and give them some years of peace. I didn't have to wait long. The 12th death came on November 1st, 2009, 20 years exactly from the signing of the new contract. Patricia Vega, age 73, the oldest of the 13. She died in her garden, kneeling in the dirt, planting bulbs for spring. When we found her, her hands were still in the soil and on her face was the most peaceful expression I'd ever seen. Her note read, "One more after me, then redemption is free. May the last soul know they carry the hope of all who came before. The contract is just. One more. 30 years left on the contract, and only 1 death remaining." The town held its breath, wondering who it would be. And I knew. I'd always known, deep down, the 13th signature on the contract had been mine. I'd been so focused on the 13 volunteers that I'd forgotten. I was number 14. I'd signed the contract as the negotiator, the mediator, the sheriff who'd made the deal. And I'd never counted myself among those who would be collected. But when I went back to look at the original document, the copy I'd kept in my office safe for 20 years, I saw it clearly. 14 signatures total, 13 volunteers, and mine at the bottom in my own hand. The entity had never said the negotiator would be exempt. I just assumed I would be. Carl found me in my office at 3 a.m., staring at the contract. "Rita, what are you doing here?" Reading the fine print, realizing what I missed, I looked up at him. "It's going to be me. I'm the last one." Carl went pale. "No, you negotiated the contract. That has to exempt you." "Why would it?" "I agreed to the terms. I signed my name. I'm as bound as the others." "But you weren't volunteering to die. You were representing the town. The contract doesn't make that distinction. 14 signatures, 14 lives. I was just too arrogant to see it." Carl sat down heavily. "Jesus, Rita, you saved this town. You can't be the price of that salvation." "Apparently I can." I closed the file. "How long have I been sheriff now?" 25 years. 25 years? 5 before the original vote, 20 after the new contract. I've watched 12 people die knowing it was coming. Now it's my turn. "We can fight this. We can't. I've tried fighting it for 20 years, Carl. It doesn't work. The contract is binding. The entity keeps its word. And now it's time for me to keep mine." I didn't tell Sophie right away. She was 34 now, living in Denver, working as a civil rights lawyer. She'd left Redemption after college and never looked back. I didn't blame her. Who would want to stay in a town defined by death? But I called her that week. "I need you to come home, just for a visit." "Mom, I can't just drop everything. Please, Sophie, it's important." She must have heard something in my voice because she agreed. When she arrived, I took her to Dave's grave. We hadn't talked much about him over the years. The grief had been too raw, too complicated. But standing there now, looking at his headstone, I finally found the words. I understand now. Why he did it. Why they all did it. "Mom, what's going on?" "I'm the last one. The 13th death. It's going to be me." Sophie's face went white. "No, you weren't one of the volunteers. You were the sheriff. You were negotiating." "I signed the contract. That makes me bound to it." I took her hand. "I need you to know I'm not afraid. I've spent 20 years watching people die peacefully, accepting their fate. Now it's my turn, and I'm ready." "I'm not ready. Mom, you can't just give up." "I'm not giving up. I'm keeping my word." Sophie was quiet for a long time. Then, "Did Dad feel this way before he died?" "Yes. He said he felt peace, like he was letting go of a weight." "Do you feel that?" I thought about it. Did I? Not yet, but I think I will. When it's time, I think I'll understand. We spent the next 3 days together, talking, remembering, trying to make peace with what was coming. Sophie wanted to fight it, to find a loophole, to somehow break the contract without consequences. But I knew better. I'd spent 20 years looking for loopholes. There weren't any. On November 1st, 2014, 25 years after the new contract was signed, I woke up feeling different, lighter, calmer. The weight of 25 years of responsibility, of grief, of guilt, suddenly felt manageable, bearable, almost pleasant. I understood what Dave had meant, what all of them had felt. The call was coming. I got dressed in my uniform, pinned on my badge, checked my service weapon even though I knew I wouldn't need it. Sophie was in the kitchen when I came downstairs. "You feel it, don't you? The pull." I nodded. "Today's the day. Then I'm staying with you." No, you should go. You don't need to see this. I saw Dad die. I can see you die too. Her voice broke. I won't leave you alone. We went to the town square together, hand in hand. The whole town was there. Everyone knew what day it was. Everyone knew what it meant. At noon, I stood in the center of the square and addressed them. 25 years ago, I negotiated a contract to save this town. 13 lives over 50 years in exchange for continued prosperity. 12 people have died fulfilling that contract. Today, I fulfill my part. The crowd was silent. Helen Grimshaw, still mayor after all these years, stepped forward. Sheriff Morales, on behalf of redemption, I want to thank you. You saved us. You gave us 25 more years of life. Whatever happens next, we owe you everything. Carl was crying. So were a lot of others, but I felt peaceful, ready. The contract is just, I said. And for the first time, I truly believed it. At 12:17 p.m., I felt it begin. The cold spreading through my chest, the slowing of my heartbeat, the gentle dimming of the world around me. Sophie held my hand. I love you, Mom. I love you too. Live well. Live fully. Don't let this town define you. The last thing I saw was Sophie's face. The last thing I felt was her hand in mine. The last thing I thought was, I kept my word. And then I woke up, not in the square, somewhere else. Somewhere dark and vast and impossibly ancient. Sheriff Rita Morales, the last payment, the debt fulfilled. The entity stood before me, or perhaps stood was the wrong word. It existed before me, a presence that filled all the space and none of it simultaneously. Am I dead? I asked. You are between, not quite gone, not quite here. This is where I bring all who fulfill contracts, to show them what their sacrifice purchased. The darkness shifted, and I saw redemption. Not as it was in 2014, but across time. I saw it in 1989, on the night of the original vote. Saw the town square filled with 156 people waiting to die. This is what would have happened, the entity said. I watched as the clock struck midnight. Watched as every person in the square collapsed. All 156, including Sophie, including Dave, including me. The original contract would have taken them all, including your daughter, who was 4 years old. That was the agreed price. The scene shifted. Now I saw a different version. The one where I'd negotiated the new terms. You offered an alternative. 13 deaths over 50 years. I accepted, and because of that choice, 143 people lived who would have died that night. I saw Sophie growing up, getting married, having children, living a full life in Denver, away from redemption but always carrying it with her. Your daughter lived because of your contract. Your husband lived 15 more years than he would have. The town prospered for another quarter century, all because you were willing to sign your name. Why are you showing me this? Because humans always wonder if they made the right choice. You have wondered for 25 years. Now you know. You chose correctly. The contract was just. The darkness shifted again, and I saw the future. Redemption in 2039, 50 years after the new contract. The town still there, still thriving, still remembering the 13 who died. The contract ends in 25 years, the entity said. Your town will have its 50 years of prosperity. Then it will be free. No more deals, no more debts. Just a normal town, with normal risks, making its own way. What happens to me? What happens to all who fulfill contracts? You join the others, the 12 who came before you. You exist here with me as witnesses to the bargains that shaped your town. So I'm dead. You are transformed. You are no longer bound by mortal limits. You exist as memory, as testament, as proof that some bargains are worth keeping. I thought about that. Existing as memory, as a reminder of what people would sacrifice to save their community. It didn't sound so bad. Can I see them, the others? The darkness shifted, and I saw them. All 12. Dave, Carl, Patricia, Martin, Alice, Robert, and the others. They stood together, not quite solid but not quite transparent. Real in a way that transcended physical form. Dave smiled at me. You made it. I kept my word. We all did. That's why we're here. That's what this place is. A repository for kept promises. I joined them, 13 souls who'd volunteered to die so others could live. 13 people who'd kept faith with a contract even when it cost them everything. And I felt complete, at peace. The 25 years of guilt and grief and second-guessing finally lifted. The contract was just. Not because the terms were fair by any human standard, but because everyone who signed it did so with full knowledge and consent. Because we'd made a choice and kept our word. Because in a world where trust and promises mean nothing, we'd proven they could still matter. What about redemption? I asked. What happens to them? The entity's voice was almost gentle. They live. They prosper. They remember. And in 25 years when the contract ends, they will be free. Will they make another deal? That is their choice. I do not force bargains. I only accept them when freely offered. I looked at my town one more time, seeing it across all its history. The desperate founding families of 1889, the prosperity of the century that followed, the vote in 1989 and the chaos after, the 25 years of the new contract and the peace it brought. And I saw Sophie, in 2039, standing in the town square on November 1st, the day the contract would finally expire. She was 64 years old, gray-haired and dignified, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. The whole town was there, just as they'd been in 1989. Helen Grimshaw's granddaughter, the current mayor, spoke. 50 years ago today, Sheriff Rita Morales negotiated a contract that saved this town. 13 people died fulfilling that contract. Today, we honor their sacrifice. Today, we remember their names. And today, redemption is finally free. The crowd was silent for a moment. Then someone started to sing. An old song, one I remembered from childhood. A hymn about grace and mercy and the price of salvation. Sophie's voice joined in, strong and clear. She was crying, but she was smiling too. She'd lived, she'd had children, she'd grown old, because of the contract, because of the 13, because of me. The entity turned to me. Do you regret your choice? I looked at Sophie one last time, surrounded by the life she'd built, the family she'd raised, the years she'd been given. No, I said, I don't regret it. Then you are at peace. Yes. And the contract? I smiled. The contract was just. The darkness faded. Or perhaps I faded into it. Either way, I stopped being Rita Morales, individual woman, and became something else. A memory, a promise, a testament to the power of keeping your word. Somewhere in Redemption, Colorado, life went on. People were born, grew old, died natural deaths. The town prospered and struggled and endured, just like any other town. But once a year, on November 1st, they gathered in the square and told the story of the contract, of the vote that nearly destroyed them, of the 13 who died to save them, of Sheriff Rita Morales, who negotiated their survival. And they would remember that sometimes the only way to save what you love is to pay the price yourself. Sometimes the only way to protect your community is to sacrifice for it. Sometimes the contract is just. In 2039, on the 50th anniversary of the new contract, Redemption held a ceremony. They unveiled a memorial in the town square, 13 stones arranged in a circle, each engraved with a name. Theodore Patterson, Margaret Reeves, Martin Hayes, Alice Brennan, Robert Cho, David Morales, Jennifer Martinez, Thomas Wright, Patricia Vega, Carl Henderson, and 4 others whose names deserve remembering. In the center of the circle, a larger stone, Sheriff Rita Morales, 1951 to 2014, the negotiator, the last signature. She saved her town. The contract was just. Sophie stood before that stone with her children and grandchildren, and she told them the story. Not as a horror, but as a testament, not as a warning, but as a reminder. That democracy means making hard choices together. That sometimes the minority of one is wrong. That sacrifices made willingly have meaning. That kept promises matter. And that a town is not just buildings and streets, but the people who choose to live there, to die there, to protect each other even at the highest cost. Redemption survived. Not because of luck or chance, but because 13 people signed their names and kept their word. The contract was fulfilled. The debt was paid, the town was free, and somewhere, in a place between memory and eternity, 13 souls watched over them still. Witnesses to the bargain that saved their town, guardians of the promises that mattered.